Hi everybody, welcome to Miss A's Flipped Classroom. I'm trying this out to see if I can give you a little bit more help that you have access to any time you get to study instead of just waiting until I'm able to be here. Sometimes you miss class or we just don't have enough time to get through everything. So I'm going to try to start breaking down things in a much simpler way for you, putting things in a little bit shorter sequence and posting them all online for you so that you can access them anytime you want to. Very thankful to be able to be here with you, and I'm thankful that God gave us our math verse that we have been working on for a long time, and so we're not going to say it every video, but let's say it this time. Okay, it's all the way around the room, remember, and this is our favorite verse, and it is, Colossians 1:16 through 17. For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth. We got to go way around the room here. Where we go? Visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him, and he is before all things, and by him all things consist. So I want you to remember that all of mathematics was created by God so that we had an orderly universe, and it all works and it stays the same no matter how old I get and long after I am no longer with you. The math is going to be the same. It's wonderful because we have a God that is the same and he never changes. So let's go ahead and learn some more about his wonderful universe as we study reciprocal trigonometric functions. Okay, so here we go. Here is lesson 41A1. I found out that this thing shuts off about every 5 minutes, so I'm going to kind of do them in little segments and try to keep them together. When we're talking about reciprocal functions in trigonometry, we're actually talking about reciprocals. Okay, first of all, we know, let's review, sine, remember toa, right? Sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So let's write sine opposite over hypotenuse, right? And the cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Adjacent over hypotenuse. And the tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. Opposite over adjacent. Okay? So now when we come up over here, we have the reciprocal functions, which we are going to, of course, we're going to flip over the hypotenuse over the opposite. Hypotenuse over the opposite. So this would be the reciprocal to the sine, and it is called the cosecant of theta. Okay? And then the reciprocal of the cosine is going to be the hypotenuse over the adjacent, and the hypotenuse over the adjacent is the secant of theta. Now the way I always remember these, and maybe it's funny to you, but I always remember that the sine and the cosecant switch from S to C, and then from the others that are paired up, the cosine is the reciprocal of the secant and vice versa. So C goes to S. So they switch their first letters, and that's how I remember it. I know, it's funny. Okay, the tangent of theta is, remember I've always told you the tangent, because it's the opposite over the adjacent, is also the sine over the cosine. Okay, because the sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse, and the cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And when we multiply by the hypotenuse over the hypotenuse, we get right back to the tangent again. So you can always think of the tangent as being the sine over the cosine. Okay, so when I do the reciprocal function, I just know it is the cotangent, and it is going to be the cosine over the sine, which is also going to be the what? Adjacent over the opposite. the adjacent over the opposite instead of the opposite over the adjacent. So that's how I remember those. Now we're going to do one problem together, which hopefully we will get done before this video clicks out on me. But we're going to do this one, secant of 330 plus the cotangent of 480. So I'm going to move this back a little bit and see if it'll still be able to see it. Okay, so now the secant of 330, remember to think unit circle. Where is the 330? It's going to be all the way around the unit circle, 30 degrees shy of our 360. 30-degree reference angle down and to the right. And so remember that the secant is 1 over the cosine. So 1 over the cosine of 330 is what we need to figure out. And the cosine of 330, I know because it's a reference angle of 30. Whenever I have my little reference angle of 30, remember, I am dyslexic, I have to do it on my fingers. When I have a little reference angle of 30, I have my cosine becomes my long one, and so it's going to be square root of 3 over 2, and since it's to the right, okay, timed out on me there. So we have square root of 3 over 2, so 1 over the square root of 3 over 2, and since it's to the right, it will be positive, okay? And then let's look at this other part over here, and it's the cotangent of 480. But the cotangent of 480, when we look at our unit circle, it's already gone all the way down around once, 360. So let's just subtract the 360 and see where we wind up. When we subtract the 360, we have a 120. So we're looking at 120 degrees past the 90 over here, 30 degrees here, but it's 60-degree reference angle, okay? So when we do this, we're going to take the cotangent is the cosine over the sine. So the cotangent is the cosine of 120 over the sine of 120, okay? And we know that the cosine of 120 is a 60-degree reference angle. My 60 degrees is going to be a cosine that is short, right? So it's going to be 1/2, but it's left, so it'll be a negative 1/2. And my sine of my 60-degree reference angle is my long one. It's square root of 3 over 2, and it's positive. So positive square root of 3 over 2, okay? So now I have this one and this one that I need to reduce and add together. All right, I've got a shine on my board here. Hopefully you can see past my shine on my board. Okay, so now this one, remember what when we divide by a fraction, we flip it and multiply. So this is really 2 over the square root of 3. And that could also be written as 2 square root of 3 over 3 when I multiply by square root of 3 over square root of 3, right? And then over here, this one, I'm dividing by this fraction, which means I'm multiplying by its reciprocal, 2 over square root of 3. So that's going to wind up canceling my 2's, and this is going to wind up being negative 1 over the square root of 3, which again has a radical in the bottom, so I'm going to multiply by square root of 3 over square root of 3 and get negative square root of 3 over 3. Okay, so now I have this one and this one to add together. And I have a positive and a negative, so when I simplify, 2 square root of 3 minus 1 square root of 3 is going to be just square root of 3 over 3. And there's my answer for the first problem. Hi everybody, welcome to Miss A's Flipped